Welcome to Double Fries No Slaw Wednesday night. We're into October already. Wake me up when September ends, right? It feels like that might have been I stole that from somebody else. If the person that said that earlier to me on the phone is watching, shout out to you. Double Fries No Slaw brought to you by Guthrie's, powered by BetUS. We'll give Roback a little love in a minute as well. We appreciate the support. We appreciate you guys tuning in and watching. Florida State and Clemson on Saturday night in Doak Campbell Stadium. We probably go into this game not necessarily thinking the way that we thought the offseason, thinking about it the way we thought it would feel in the offseason. But nonetheless, we're going to show up and keep doing our jobs, Richie, and we're going to talk about these games no matter what. And there's two more of these that we'll do that I don't feel great about lining up for the preview, but guess what? We're here and we're going to do it. So how's your week been before we get into thoughts on the game?
It's been good. It's actually been kind of relaxing. Normally Clemson week, we were expecting a top 10 matchup. It would be stressful. I'd spend all day at work just doing nothing but looking at everything from the game, listening to national podcasts, Clemson podcast, just to see what's going on. But it's been a stress-free week. Luckily, work is going well right now. We have a big event going on Friday where I have to dress up as Hagrid from Harry Potter. I don't want to get into that too much, but it's going well. It's crazy that preseason we were 4.5-point favorites in this game, and we'll get into what the spread is now, which is still kind of surprising, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm a little intrigued by it. We'll talk about it as we go. And get into it a little bit deeper. But yeah, I'm a little intrigued by the spread. It's a little different than maybe what I expected. But yeah, let's jump right into it and let's get rolling. Double Fries No Straw brought to you by Guthrie's. I'm putting together some details on what a tailgate may or may not look like this weekend. I'm interested to see what attendance looks like this weekend. But one way or the other, if you're in town, come by the tailgate. If you're not in town, hit a Guthrie's, whether it's in Tallahassee or anywhere else, but 1818 West Tennessee, 2550 North Monroe, and then 2870 Appalachia Parkway. Several other locations that you can visit. Thomasville, there's one in, I think, Panama City. There's a bunch. So all around the state, there's one here in Tampa. Here in Florida, there's a bunch, and then obviously a ton. I passed like 3 when I was in Tuscaloosa. So they're all up through Atlanta and Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia as well. So go check out Guthrie's. Appreciate them for their support. All right, Richie, let's jump into it. Florida State and Clemson this weekend. Again, a game that doesn't have the same vibe that we thought it might. Opened at 14 and a half, and then has now, or I guess you say, I read that backwards. Opened at like 15 and a half. I've seen it everywhere, like 14 or so, but it hasn't really moved off that. Does it? I mean, we're going to preview it. We're going to pick it. I wonder if Richie will be bold and pick us again this week. But either way, it seems surprising to me that line is at 14 and a half, 15, and hasn't moved much. Like,
yes,
it wouldn't. And this is a different year, right? And Clemson's not as good either. But like in 2020, I want to say they were like correct me. I'll look it up. Like I thought it was 28. I'll look it up real quick. FSU, Clemson. 2020. If you're listening to an FSU Clemson preview right now, you're an absolute degenerate. So I don't mind like a little live radio, like looking it up. I thought it was 28 and a half because I kind of remember taking it. So, here we go. Vegas odds for the 20. Oh, this is hoops. But anyway, I'll look that up. What are your thoughts on why why that spread is so freaking low to me?
I have no idea. When I saw it open, I'm like, sure enough, that's going to jump right up to as much as 20 and a half. I didn't think it'd get to 21 and a half, but definitely thought it could get to 20 and a half. But the fact that it opened at 15 and a half and is now holding steady at 14 and a half, I still think there's time for it to move, a point or two, beyond. I could see it getting up all the way to 16 and a half, but maybe not 17 because that hook is tricky. But it makes me wonder where that early money came from on Florida State, because when the line came out, DJ Uiagalelei had not been ruled out yet. And we got news early this week that, he is, his finger's broken. He'll be out several weeks. We don't need to get into that. But Brock Glenn will be starting. And, Brock, what a first 3 games he has to deal with. But, yeah, just the line movement itself, I definitely expected it to move towards Clemson. I feel like it's free money if you bet on Clemson right now. But the way the line is just not moving, I don't know what to think.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because even last week, like, you know, Florida State was a dog by 4.5 points at open, and then it moved up to about a touchdown by game, right? Which is pretty normal. I mean, the SMU is not a great team. I mean, I know they snowballed and ran away with it, but if a couple things go your way, you score down on the goal line and tie the game up, like it's probably a close game late, and 4.5 was, 4.5 or 7 was a good line. And honestly, like I kind of liked Florida State, close to the spread. I think I picked SMU by like 10 or so. I don't remember, but okay. Looked up an article from 2020. You're not going to believe this. They opened up at 35, Richie. Jeez. That game in Tallahassee. Now, it was COVID, and so you had less fans, so the home field advantage of Doak was lowered. And obviously in 2020, I think we had like 2 wins then. So not a great team going into that game. I think I'm pretty sure I can't find an article from like right when the game kicked off, and I'm done looking at this point because I'm bald enough up here. I don't need people to see the top of my head. I want to say it was like 27.5. I kind of you can't always remember where you were when big things happened, and obviously a COVID cancellation was pretty big. I remember it being like 27.5, and looking at Kara and saying, I think I'm going to take Clemson here. Like I'm going to try and pay for our Savannah trip on this game right now, and I put a little bit on it. Sorry to bet against us, but. Yeah, it ended up, obviously the game got canceled, but open up at 35 is freaking wild. Okay, I don't want to go into this super far, and we'll start to preview the game here. But again, if you're listening to this right now, you're a degenerate, and we really appreciate you. Would 2020's team beat this team?
So this team is far more talented than 2020, but I don't know. I think that's funny. I think it'd be a dogfight. I think you're looking at like a 2.5 point spread as we're talking about betting lines here. I just don't know what this team is doing. Like we talked about on Sunday, we don't need to rehash everything again, but this team does literally nothing well at all. You could say maybe first and second down defense, they're okay. But other than that, this team doesn't do anything good at all.
So what would the advantage in this year's roster versus 2020 would be the defense, right? Like defensive line is pretty good. But I don't think he was great then, right? Like this isn't a shot. Who would have been starting? Like would Jordan have been starting by then? Because I don't think he started that. He didn't start early, right? Like it was Blackman early. And so if Jordan would have been starting, like we struggle with a mobile quarterback, like that could have been bad news. And so that might have been bad if Jordan started against this team. Second, the offense in 2020 wasn't just like absolute putrid. Like even as bad as the 2020 defense was, I still don't know that this iteration of offense could score on them consistently. Like they might get to 14, they might get to 17. Shout out the team for getting to 16 last week because of the punt. But anyway,
scored 14.
I don't know that offense could have scored 21. And I want to say that Jordan against this defense could have scored 21. Like it would have snowballed. And yeah, I'd take 2020. So, all right, let's get into the actual game. Let's start with this before we talk about Clemson too much. And this is a good endpoint for you, Harlan. Brock Glenn going to start this game. And this is a situation. It was so funny to me, Richie. And I'm going to call some people out, not by name because I'm a coward. But no, not just because I don't need the beef. I don't need the fight. But it was interesting to me. And obviously, the reason Brock is starting this game is because of the injury to DJ. Like I said last week on here that I thought you'd let DJ wear the SMU game. You'd let him wear the Clemson game. You let him play against his old team. Hey, man, you came in. We'll let you play the first 6, but then we're going to move on. And then you'd have the bye week to get Brock or whomever ready. That's what I thought was going to happen anyway. I don't have any inside information. Mike didn't tell me that. Ingram didn't tell me that. Derek Ray didn't tell me that. Like, nobody told me that, right? Like, I'm just guessing. It's kind of how I think it was going to work out anyway. DJ breaks his hand or breaks a finger in his hand, the throwing hand. You move on a week faster. But people begged for Brock, Richie, from the Boston College game on. They were chanting his name in the Boston College game. Brock gets announced as the starter, gets announced as the co-starter, right? Like they list him on the depth chart. And immediately people, when you're doing poorly, people are just mad no matter what.
Yeah.
Everyone just started saying like, well, I can't believe you're starting him now. Like, I mean, they didn't know about the broken finger at that point, but immediately the narrative was like, how could Norvell do this? How could Norvell put Brock Glenn in against Clemson? And it was just funny to me because I knew he was hurt at that point. Like I put a tweet out that he was banged up and probably going to be out for the year. So I kind of knew in that moment, and not saying I know everything or whatever, but I did get some insight that he was injured and said that like he's hurt, he's not going to play, and I expect Brock to play going forward. But it was funny to watch the reaction of people that had begged for Brock for like 5 weeks, finally get Brock, and then be like, I'm pissed off that you're starting him against Clemson. It really just does kind of show how fragile we are right now, that like even the things we ask for, we then complain about. So I don't know. We'll talk about that before we get into Brock actually playing, I guess.
Yeah, and that happens. And you know what? I went to Florida State during the Drew Weatherford, Xavier Lee years, and there's an old thing for a bad team. The most favorite player on that team for the fan base is always the backup quarterback, right? It's just what it's going to be. I said on the show weeks ago that I was done with DJ, ready to move on, and I hate that it's an injury that made it happen, but it sucks for Brock that here we are now in his third career start after starting against Louisville and Charlotte in the ACC title game, then being thrown to the Wolves against Georgia with no receivers in the Orange Bowl. Now is going to be against probably the best defense Florida State sees all year against Clemson. And I hate that it came to this, because I would have loved for DJ to be able to just take this game. Maybe he finds some magic against his old team. Probably wasn't going to happen, but just give him that chance. And then you move on at that point. But I said weeks ago that it's time to move on. And how good would it have been for him to get on the field last week against SMU? I'm not saying we win the game. We probably still lose it. Probably still lose it by a lot if he starts. But the fact that Brock is now thrown into this situation, and now we're one play away from being forced to throw Luke Kromenhoek into the fire, this is not a good situation heading into Saturday night, TJ. Not at all.
Yeah, it's not ideal in any situation. And I agree. It would have been great if Brock could have played against Memphis. Or I'm sorry, against SMU last week. I mean, in all reality, Mike was still trying to win games, right? And I'm not a Mike apologist here on this, because Mike's in a world of trouble that he needs to figure out a way to pull himself out of. Let's just be very frank and very blunt about that, just big picture. But I do think Mike was still trying to win games. And I think, against the worst teams on your schedule, you try and win games if you can, because people may argue about this, but I do think it was important for the team to try and get to a bowl game if they could. They obviously can't now. In theory they could, but probably are not now. But hindsight being 2020, if you knew you were going to lose a few more games, I wish you just started him for Memphis, giving him but you weren't going to bench DJ after 2 games. I get that. But man, hindsight being what it is, I wish you'd have given Brock the first team reps and let him play against Memphis, and then let him play against Cal, and then let him play against SMU. And then I'd feel a little bit better about his chances here against Clemson. Man, it's going to be tough. There's no doubt about it. You mentioned they're probably the best or the second best, top 2 for sure. Notre Dame's got a good defense too, but it's one of the best defenses between them, Notre Dame and Miami, that you're going to see all year. And to have to start against that, fortunately, he did start in an ACC championship game. He did start with a month of experience being the signal caller for, not really a month of experience, no, because Tate kind of deuced out less than a week before. So Tate was taking a lot of those first team reps. Appreciate that, man. But what are your expectations for Brock in this game? Like, how do you even kind of quantify that? Like, what do you want to see from him? And what do you think when you think about Brock Glenn starting this game?
It's hard to say, because I don't think he's going to have much time to throw. He's still a young guy. I think he's still a freshman by eligibility standards. It's tricky. And he lost half of his, quote unquote redshirt freshman season due to being injured and not being able to even practice even a scout team. And as silly as that sounds, that helps a lot. I have very low expectations for Brock this week. Just looking at his career stats, he's 19 for 55. That's a 34.5 completion percentage. Again, that's Louisville. That's Georgia. A couple reps in a couple games earlier this year. 4.2 yards per attempt. Not great, but again, it's a different sample size. And he does not really have, outside of Ja'Kai Douglas, who's, 5'8" on a good day, 5'9". What receivers, proven commodities do you have? You hope Lawrence Toafili can help him out of the backfield. I think Mike Norvell, he's going to want to try to establish some semblance of a rush game and try and shorten this game as much as possible. I think you're not going to see up tempo at all. I think you're going to see Florida State running the game clock down as low as possible to try and, normally Florida State, a Mike Norvell offense, would want 12, 13, 14 possessions. I think Mike Norvell would be more than happy with a 7 or 8 possession game. Is Florida State able to dictate that? I don't think so. You just got to hope that, as far as Brock goes and expectations, just make the right reads. Even if you miss a player or you throw an interception, if you're throwing to the right guy, that's what I want to see. I want to see what command of the offense does he have? And I don't expect him to have total command at all. He's not got all the first team reps. These guys are not entirely familiar with him. DJ's got all those reps. But is he progressing through his reads? And again, that pass rush is going to be a problem. But is he throwing the ball to the right person? I don't care if it's a bad throw or, if it gets tipped at the line or picked off. Is he throwing the ball to the right person? That's what I want to see. And I kind of want to see what his mobility looks like. But I hope Mike doesn't run him too much because, again, we're one play away from a true freshman coming into the game.
Yeah, I will say this. I've spoken with a couple of people, had a couple of phone calls today about this, and I, certainly not going to break any news here, but then I'll kind of give some insight on what I think things could end up looking like. I obviously expect them to shorten the playbook and make it more vanilla. I really, really expect them to try to control as much clock as they can, both offensively and defensively, just to try and help Brock and try and help the game in general. Mike understands what's about to be facing him. And, I don't know that you're going to a true 4 corners, basketball type offense, but I do think you're trying to play like that a little bit, right? You're not taking a bunch of shots. You're not play action on the first play to try and get Benson because even if you score on the first play of the game and you feel great at 7-0, that's just an extra possession for Clemson, right? Would I rather score on the first possession of the game and it take 14 seconds, or would I rather have 2 6-minute drives in the first quarter that culminate in 3 points? I might rather have, you know what I'm saying? You're trading 4 points there, but from a time perspective, I might as well rather just have the 2 long drives that use up 12 minutes of the clock and you get 3 points out of it, right? So, yeah, is that the best scenario? But just for example, I think they'll try and shorten the game. I think they'll do a lot of stuff that's side to side, trying to take advantage of some speed, whether that's Douglas or Jaylen Brown or just whomever. I think they'll try and run a lot and try and get the running game going. I don't know how effective they'll be. We can talk about the offensive line here in a minute, but I do think they'll do that. On defense, I think they'll play the same way. I think they'll play bend, don't break a ton on defense. Don't get beat deep. Don't let Cade take off 55 yards like he did to open up the game against NC State. I think they'll try and slow things down based on a couple of conversations. I think they'll also, people have been begging for them to utilize Brock's legs and for them to utilize what he can do there. I think they will QB run some. And I think they'll be trying to be smart with it. I don't expect them to Michael Vick this thing or whatever. But I do, or Monroe, right? Like we saw last week. But I do think they'll try and take advantage of Brock's legs at times. Picky, choosy, 5 times this game, not a ton. I've kind of been told to kind of watch out for the QB run a little bit. I think that's something that would be smart and would behoove them. And so I think they'll try and limit possessions. If it's another, you think about that, Georgia Tech scored on 5 possessions of their 8, right? If Clemson only scores on 5 possessions of their 8, that's a max of 35 points. Right? If Clemson only scores 35 in this, that's probably not the worst, right? That's probably not as bad as some. And if they only score on 4 possessions, then you're keeping them in the 20s, right? And if those are field goals, then you're lowering that even more to if I told you right now, Richie, that Clemson was only going to score 24, which I don't expect that. I actually think it's going to be more than that. If I told you right now that Clemson was only going to score 24, that means you're probably not really getting blown out. You're probably losing 24-10 or something, 24-13. You'd be pretty thrilled with that. The offense is going to probably get a touchdown or a field goal or 2. And so, yeah, I think that's the way they'll play. I do think that they'll try and limit mistakes. The worry I have with Brock is I just still don't think he's super accurate, right? I think he puts the ball on the guy. You mentioned 34% completion percentage. That's a little unfair. Man, even Keon and those guys had some drops in the ACC championship game. But even when so if the wide receivers and tight ends play super well and they do kind of catch everything, I think there's probably 20, 25% of the passes that are going to be uncatchable. And that's not a shot at Brock. I don't think he's super accurate, right? I mean, 20% of DJ's passes haven't been catchable at this point in the year. And so I think that that's probably something you're gonna have to look at too. Is, man, not most, but a good chunk of his passes probably are not going to be super catchable anyway. And so you try and limit that. You try and give him really easy read stuff. I do think that a pro is he will move faster than DJ. He will, just mentally, physically, everything. Because I think DJ's been pretty banged up. And so I do think he'll move a little quicker. I think that'll help. I think he'll be a little more decisive. Now, is he going to be super accurate? Probably be less accurate than DJ if we're just keeping it a buck. But he'll move a little quicker. He'll look a little more confident. He'll look a little comfortable. I'll say this. I mean, he wasn't great in the Georgia game, but he looked like he had command of the offense. Like, he didn't look like the moment was too big for him. Now, maybe in that game, he had zero expectations and knew that we were going to lose and get blown out. So he just didn't, not that he didn't care, but like just didn't, I'm not like scared. Like, we go out and play our best and see what happens. But all those things considering, all those things combined, I really don't see a path to a Florida State victory, but I do see a path to, like, if Florida State can do what they want to do and kind of capitalize on some situations, I think they can keep it somewhat close. If the defense plays out of their minds, maybe it's a game in the second half, maybe not. But I think they can keep it close enough to keep it respectable. And honestly, at the end of the day, you're a 14-point dog. I mean, Vegas is telling you you should keep it within 2 touchdowns. We'll see if you can. I think this is the best defense that Clemson will have played all year. I mean, there's really no doubts about that. I mean, but just between Tennessee and Clemson, NC State gave up 100 points, and neither one of those teams even tried in the fourth quarter. And so, 6 quarters of football, you give up to 100 points to those 2 teams, which do have really good offenses, don't get me wrong. But, this is certainly the better defense that they've played. If the defense can kind of give a full max-out effort, then I think they'll be fine. But, yeah, I'm kind of with you. All that said, that 3-minute rant or whatever that ended up being, nobody timestamp it. My expectations for Brock aren't super high in this thing either. And, fan base is kind of going to get what they asked for, right? Like, get them some reps for next year. If that matters, great. If not, we'll see. But, my expectations are not super, super high that he could be great. So any other thoughts on Brock, or want to move on to some other stuff?
No, I just, to your point, I do think confidence is not an issue with him. And we've heard that since he's got onto campus. He's going to go out there with confidence that, he can do the best he can. I think he understands limitations this offense has, whether it's the front 5 or the inconsistency with his receivers and tight ends. But I think he's going to go out there confident, and I don't think he's going to shy away from the moment, which is something you're afraid of sometimes when you have a young quarterback going in to a big night game at home. I don't think the moment will be too big for him. If he has a horrible game, I think it'll just be because Clemson's defense is that good and he's not that developed yet. It won't be because he's in his own head or anything like that. I truly think, his mindset is, I'm going to go out there and just play my game, and hopefully it works out.
So let's, Richie, why don't you give a little love to Roback, and then we'll talk more about this game.
Yeah, definitely. So excited. We've announced it a few weeks ago that we are now partnering with Roback. The best polos, hoodies, joggers, you name it. They sell women's performance attire as well, in the brand or in the business. TJ's got the FSU quarter zip from Roback.
Amazing.
I have the same one. It's amazing. I'm wearing one of their hoodies right now. I'm also wearing their joggers. My wife is like, this is your 3rd day wearing these joggers around the house at night. Yeah, they're that good. They really are. I love Roback attire. I've been a customer before we became partners with them. They hooked me, Harlan, and TJ up with some gear, and I will be wearing them for every show because I have so much good stuff and it's so comfortable. And for first-time buyers, if you use promo code DFNS20, again, that is DFNS20. Oh, look at that hoodie right there. That Florida State hoodie. I love that. That's probably the favorite thing I have. But again, use promo code DFNS20 and you'll get 20% off your first-time purchase at roback.com. That's RHOBACK.com, DFNS20. Trust me, if you haven't tried it, just give it a try. I promise you will be a repeat customer. How you liking that quarter zip, TJ?
I do love it. Kara was like, "Oh, did you get anything from me?" And I was like, "Oh, well, they just kind of like sent this stuff." Because I usually, like, if I order from Garnet and Gold, like, or anyone else, like, which certainly still do, and they even may start carrying Roback stuff. I always get her, like, I always get like her and the kids like two or three things, and I get myself one thing. And so she's like, "Hey, what'd you get me?" And I was like, Richie did this, so sorry. Next time they send us
You can
anything,
throw me
Richie,
under the bus. That's fine.
yeah, do something for the wives, please. So, but yeah, Roback stuff is really good. It's super comfortable. It's going to be, I don't know how cool it'll be, but I might still wear this Saturday. So we'll see. All right. Our offensive line against their D line, we've getting some comments about the strength of their defense. And I will say, like, their defense was really good against NC State early. NC State kind of ran up, on like the third string and scored some in the fourth quarter. I think their defense is still really, really talented. I do worry about our O-line. Like, our O-line has not held up against like mediocre defenses like Georgia Tech and BC and, SMU last week. SMU has no K defense. But I worry about their D-line and their defense against our offense for sure.
Yeah, I came into the season, based on what we've heard from practice reports and even what Mike Norvell said himself. He said he thought this was the best offensive line he's had ever. He thought they were 11, 12 deep. And then we're out in Dublin, TJ, and we're watching the game, and I'm watching Georgia Tech blow this offensive line up. I'm like, okay, maybe first game jitters, and it's not gotten any better since then. It really hasn't. This team has a long way to go up front, which is really baffling to me. It wasn't but 2 years ago where Alex Atkins was the toast of the town. Everyone's like, the best offensive line or best assistant coach we have. We were scared we were going to lose him to a head coaching job somewhere else at a group of 5 team or even a Power 5 school. And I'm just not seeing it. I don't know what it is. They have the bodies, they have the size, they have the athleticism. It's just not a good offensive line. And Clemson has a very good defensive line. And Clemson has very good linebackers. I'm concerned about that matchup up front. Hopefully Mike can scheme some things up, but I'm not feeling good about our offense, mainly because it starts up front, and I have no confidence there whatsoever.
Yeah, I've seen some comments about Clemson's defense not being great, and again, I don't think they're like elite. Even Miami's defense that you'd think like was pretty good, gave up a crap ton of points at home to Virginia Tech, and so it's almost like the combination of their defense being super talented and our offense being hot trash. Now, maybe the spark happens with Brock. I'm not super hopeful of that, but it would. I mean, Richie, how now unless like they just get up by a ton and like we kind of score late, like kind of like BC did. I'm sorry, like NC State did. I mean, you'd be shocked if we scored 20 in this, right? We haven't done it yet this year. Well, I guess we did in the first game. We haven't done it yet this year. I mean, so I don't see us scoring 20 here, right?
No, not unless you get a fluke play like a blocked punt or a special teams touchdown. But Deuce Spann never takes the ball out of the end zone, so we're not going to get a kickoff return for a touchdown. You need a block punt or a kick return or a pick six or something fluky like that to happen. The offense will not. I'll put it this way: the offense alone will not score 20 points this weekend.
So, Cade Klubnik, you wrote this, and you're right. Again, everything with a grain of salt, because I spoke with some Clemson folks this week, and they were like, we like what Cade's looks like, but we've played absolutely nobody. Like NC State and Stanford are terrible. And so 12 touchdowns and 2 interceptions for the year, playing a little bit better. All of those 12 touchdowns after the Georgia game. But seems to be playing better. And certainly you don't necessarily like to see him hitting his stride. Now, again, outside of Georgia, this will be the best defense that he's played. Are you a Cade believer yet, Richie, or are you still kind of in wait-and-see mode on him based on who they played?
Definitely wait-and-see mode. Georgia, I'm never going to judge a quarterback playing Georgia's defense unless you're Jalen Milroe, which was phenomenal. That's the exception. I think he should be the early Heisman, not anyone else mentioned currently. But I'm still in wait-and-see mode a little bit with Cade Klubnik, but I do think he's kind of found something. Second year with an offensive coordinator, third year with the program. He was highly recruited out of high school. I think it was a 5-star. He has the talent, and if he can put it all together, I think he has a chance to be a special quarterback. I don't think he's a guy who's going to go to the NFL after this year, even though he would be eligible. But I do think he's a guy that could be a draft pick if he comes back another year at Clemson. If he continues on this trajectory throughout the end of this season and does it again next year, I think you could see him as a day 2 or 3 pick. He's definitely a talented player and very athletic, which is a little scary because mobile quarterbacks have just roasted us since we've had Fuller here. And to be fair, a lot of teams struggle with mobile quarterbacks, but not to the extent that we have. But yeah, I like Cade Klubnik. I think he's a very good college quarterback. He reminds me a little bit of Jordan Travis in his progression from when he first came to Florida State to when he left Florida State. We'll see if Klubnik can meet that trajectory because I think Jordan his last year was much better than Cade is now. But he's definitely climbing, TJ.
Phil Maffa. I'm going to just ignore that and go. All right, I'm starting to hate that word climb until we get a little bit better. So just to let you know, I'm going to move on from that. Phil Maffa is averaging nearly 10 yards a carry in conference play. Again, NC State and Stanford, those two opponents. However, this defensive line and these linebackers and stuff that, they've shown some improvement. Before they, I think, quit on Saturday night against SMU, they were looking a little bit better. But a power running game, and Phil Maffa is certainly a powerful running back, scares me a ton. And then you have Wesco mentioned here. They've got some pretty serious weapons out at wide receiver too. A true freshman that I think they really really like. They've got the weapons that kind of worry you if this thing starts to get out of hand for sure.
Yeah, no, Maffa, he's a guy that, man, he's a guy that scares me in a game like this with Florida State being 1-4, right? If you're 5-0 and they're 4-1 or 3-1, whatever it may be, he's a guy that if he breaks into the open and you're a linebacker or a defensive back and he's running full head of steam, you might make a business decision and say, nah, let me just make it look like I'm going for the tackle, but not really. He is a dude. He's not Derrick Henry. He's built similar to Derrick Henry. He doesn't have Derrick Henry's speed, who took off for 87 yards for a touchdown on Sunday, which was ridiculous. But no, he's a guy that I would not want to take head on in a one-on-one in the open field. So the defensive line, I do think Florida State's defensive line has still played really hard. And they might be missing a few assignments, but I think they could potentially slow him down a bit. But Joshua Farmar, as bad as the season has been, he has been outstanding the past few games. So I don't want to be all negative here. I think Darrell Jackson has a chance to still have a really good season. And I like what we have on both ends with Pat Peyton and Marvin Jones Jr. And maybe Pat Peyton saw that his NCAA or CFB 25 rating got downgraded by 2 points today. And maybe that motivates him to come back and fight this week. I do like our defensive line. I don't like our linebackers at all. I like our secondary, but they can't communicate. So how good is that? But yeah, those two guys that, Maffa and Wesco, those are the two guys I'll keep my eye on. And if they can find a way to neutralize those guys to some extent, that's your way to an upset. And, I don't want to sit here and say Florida State's going to get blown out. They have no chance, whatever. I think that's likely. But college football is the one sport more than any sport that upsets happen regularly. Every single week we see upsets. No one thought Kentucky was going to go into Oxford to meet Ole Miss last week. And I know we're not as good as Kentucky is, but that doesn't matter. But yeah, they have some weapons on offense and cause to be concerned.
I saw this question on the comments, and so we'll just kind of answer it. But any whether it's with Toa Philly, whether it's with Cam Davis, I'm going to do that for the next 2 years because it's just too close of a name. Any Wildcat? You think they'll pull out some Wildcat in this thing?
So if they did, I'd prefer them to do it with Deuce Spann. He played quarterback at Illinois before he transferred. He played quarterback at Eastside down in Tampa, your neck of the woods, TJ. He can throw the ball. We saw it in the LSU game 2 or 3 years ago, the one in New Orleans. I do think there's going to be a lot of Wildcat. I think you'll see it with Lawrence Toafili. But I think, if Brock just is terrible, what do you have to lose of going with a guy like Deuce Spann and just saying, hey, the basics and let's run it. I know that's a long shot, just a random thought off the top of my head. But, yeah, I definitely think we see some Wildcat this weekend.
I'd like to. Even if it's not a ton, it doesn't have to be as much as the ACC championship. Just get the numbers advantage and go.
Yeah.
All right, we'll pick this game in just a minute. I will give Bet US a little love. And then, Richie, after we do our pick six here, I want to ask you about that Heisman thing because I got a different take on the Heisman, but we'll talk about it in a minute. Bet US, make sure you're using our code YouTube150. I've had several of you ask if that is reputable, if you can use them. Listen, I've deposited, I've won, I've lost, I've cashed out, I've done all of it. So Bet US, YouTube150 if you want to make some money. Hey, you think Florida State's too big of too close in this line? Go bet on Clemson. I don't care. Go make you some money this weekend. Bet US, YouTube 150 gets you 150% deposit sign up bonus. You get 125% on your next two deposits, all three of those up to $2,000. We appreciate Bet US for their support. Really enjoyed their customer service. They call me at times after I deposit. Hey, everything go well with that? Do you need anything? Would you like an extra bonus? Like they've given me extra bonuses on top of the ones that I've done. I cashed out one time and then lost the rest of the money that was in there. And they said, hey, we'd like to get you back in the game. Here's just a free play bonus. Like, go have fun. So really been fun. I can't guarantee they're going to do that for you or not, but BetUS has been a great experience for me personally as a user. And then we appreciate their support of the show as well. So BetUS, appreciate them for all that they've done, their support. All right, let's pick these. Harlan, if you want to pick these two, let's jump into it and let's do it. Missouri at Texas A&M. A&M's a 2.5-point favorite in this game. Coming off their win against Arkansas, Missouri has not looked great. Struggled with Vandy, struggled with Boston College. But I think even though this game's on the road, I'll take Mizzou with the points. I'd like Mizzou to win this thing outright. Not an A&M believer just yet. So I will take Missouri to kind of figure things out coming out of the bye week. Richie, Harlan, what you guys got?
I'm going to take A&M just because, it's one of those things where I thought Mizzou heading into the season was going to be very good. I've actually undersold A&M. But it's more of a show me thing, and they've not shown me anything yet. So I'm going to go A&M on this one.
Harlan said, don't worry about him. He's tired of losing to us every week on these. Nobody actually tracks them, though, so I don't know who's winning these. And I promise you nobody's going to go back and listen to preview shows to see what we picked. SMU at Louisville. Louisville, a touchdown favorite. Richie, I'll let you go first on this one. We'll flip-flop.
Louisville big. I think 7 is too low. I know SMU just took us to the woodshed last week, but I think Louisville wins this game by 17 plus, to be honest.
Ooh, let's go. I like Louisville too. I think SMU's fool's gold. They got it rolling against Florida State late when we kind of had quit. So I like Louisville. Ole Miss -9 at South Carolina. Man, kind of like that. I'm probably going to look like a fool for this, but I'm going to take South Carolina to win this thing outright. I'll take South Carolina to cover, and then I'll take them on the money line too. That's bold. I get it, but I think that South Carolina's got a really good defensive front. I think Kentucky's got a good defensive front, and that's why Ole Miss struggled. And I'm not. I mean, I guess if you lose to Kentucky and South Carolina, I'm out on you because you're going to lose to other teams too. So I'm not out on Ole Miss. Like they could turn it around and make the playoff, but I'm going to go roll with South Carolina here to cover and to win.
I hate to agree. I'm not going to take South Carolina outright, but I do think they cover that spread. I think 9 points is entirely too much. On the road in an SEC game, if your name's not Alabama or Georgia, I don't like that line being that high. I'll take South Carolina. They're not playing at Vandy. It's South Carolina. Bryce Williams Stadium gets rocky.
Yeah, I'd like to go to a game there. My buddy, my best man at my wedding was a big South Carolina fan. All right, how about this one? Michigan, number 10 in the country, nearly lost to Minnesota last week in Ann Arbor, but they're a 2.5-point dog at Washington, which Washington's not a great team this year. So Michigan, is Michigan fake good? Are they the fakest good number 10 team in the country? I know that we started at number 10, but Michigan, a 2.5-point dog at Washington, Richie.
Rat poison. This line is just begging you to take Washington. Michigan goes in there. They're going to win outright, and they will just out-physical Washington. They're going to win this game. I see why Washington is favored, but I don't see Michigan losing this game. I will bet money line on them outright.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think Michigan. I was hoping you'd take Washington. I mean, again, we don't keep track of this, but for some reason, I think we do. It's like whose line is it anyway? I'll take Michigan to win and cover, of course, by pulling the upset. USC -8 at Minnesota. I think Minnesota has the letdown game. I'll go first on this one. I mean, Minnesota, moral victory themselves to a 3-point loss against Michigan on the road. They're going to lose by more than 8 against USC. I don't think USC is great either. They struggled last week as well. But once they got it going, I like Miller Moss to kind of put Minnesota away. I think it's a bad matchup for Minnesota. I take USC here to cover.
Give me Minnesota. You just don't go in to the Gophers' house and walk out with a W. No, seriously though, I do think they cover. I think what we've seen from both teams so far this year is who they are for the most part. I know there's always that hangover effect after a game like that when you get so close to a huge upset and then you end up losing. But I do think, I'm not saying Minnesota is going to win, but I think they keep it within a touchdown.
All right, this one's weird. It opened up at 13.5, 14. Miami was a 2-touchdown favorite, and that has fallen all the way to 10. Miami at Cal, the game day game, 10:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff. Miami minus 10. What do you got here?
Cal outright.
Oh my goodness, you're a psychopath. All right, talk about it.
They're flying 5 hours to the West Coast. I don't think Cal's as bad as they looked against Florida State. That's the thing. We got them on their worst day, which is the only reason we're not 0-5 right now. I think there's a reason the money is moving the way it is. Cal may not win, but I'm going to still take them outright, but I definitely think they cover.
I'll take Miami to cover this. I think they got their wake-up call last week. I do think Cal is not very good. You know, that Auburn win looks worse and worse every week. I mean, they needed 4 Peyton Thorne turnovers to win that game by 7. I'll take Miami to cover here. I certainly would love for Richie to be right, but I'll take Miami to cover. All right, I'll do a bonus one. We'll do a pick 7. UCF opened up as a 3-point dog to Florida, and now they're a 3-point favorite. Actually, I think it's 2.5 right now on BetUS.
Crazy.
UCF going – okay, and remember this. A little callback for you. 2015, Florida State opened up as a 3-point dog in the Swamp. That immediately flipped. Like within a day, had flipped to Florida State being a 3-point favorite. So it kind of reminds me of that. Florida State obviously won that game 27-2.
What year was that?
2015.
Okay, yeah.
Won that game 27-2. I don't think UCF wins 27-2. But UCF, UF, who do you like there?
I'll take the Gators money line. I just think, UCF, after what Colorado did to them last week and, going into the Swamp, it is going to be a top 5 environment in college football this weekend. Just their fans, they know they're not a good team, but they also know they have little brother from Orlando coming to town, and I think they're going to be ready for them. I think the players will feed off the crowd. I think it'll be too big of a moment for UCF. I hope I'm wrong, but I think Florida wins by 10 or more.
Oh, wow. So I think UCF will kind of score at will, and the game comes down to me is can they get enough stops? Because Florida's offense, when it gets rolling, like Mertz is pretty good, or has been against bad defenses. I think UCF kind of ran into, like, Deion basically came out and said, like, hey, I'm going to load the box. You ain't going to run on us, and I'll have Travis Hunter take away your best wide receiver because they're kind of a one wide receiver offense. And so because of that, I don't think UF can do the same thing. Like, I don't think they can load the box and have the best player in the game, take away a good wide receiver. So I actually think UCF has a great chance here. But if I was truly betting this thing, I'd probably take UF with the points. Just because of the little bit of insurance, you get the 2.5 there because I do think it's a coin flip. But I'm going to lean UCF to win. So because of that, since I think UCF wins, UF just finds way to lose games. And so, that's probably what I'm resting on the most is Malzahn's a little bit better. Malzahn's a much better coach than Billy Napier. So I think they win. Okay, before we do a score prediction, let's talk about this Heisman thing. You said that you think Monroe is the best player in the country. I think he played incredibly well.
Not the best player in the country, but the leader, in my opinion. I think Travis Hunter is by far the best player in the country.
I think if the Heisman was today, Hunter should still be the Heisman. Because right now, through 5 games, over 500 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, like 3 passes defended, and a couple tackles for loss. Like, to me, what he is doing, like, and that forced fumble was the forced fumble against Baylor in overtime to win the game. Like, he forced the fumble and it went out of the back of the end zone and they won on 4th down. The interceptions have both been spectacular diving plays. Like, they're not just like, oh, look what I found, interceptions. And then he scored 6 touchdowns as well. He's on pace for like 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 1,300 yards and change. If he keeps that pace up and they win 8 or 9 games, which again,
that's the key point right there.
8 or 9 games, but
that's a key factor.
But their schedule is is not very difficult. Like they play Cincinnati, they play Utah with a back. If Rising's not back yet, they play Kansas, who's been terrible this year. Like I think they could get to 8 or 9 wins. I'm not guaranteeing it. Either way, I don't think the Heisman should just automatically go to the best quarterback on the best team, whether that be Ward or Nico or Jalen. Like there is no doubt that Travis Hunter is the best player in the country. And if you're just giving it to the best player in the country, like if he keeps this up, to me, Travis Hunter should be the Heisman.
Realistically, they could go 6-6, and if he keeps up the play he's done, I think he should win the Heisman. He's going to play twice as many snaps as almost any other player in the country. Like going two ways, he'd be the first defensive player to win the Heisman since Desmond Howard, even though he plays offense as well. But yeah, Travis Hunter, there's no doubt he is the best player in the country. There is no question whatever, and that is painful to say for those of you watching it who know what happened to us. But I'm extremely happy for him. He seems like a really good young man, and I would not be mad at all if he won the Heisman. In fact, I'd celebrate it because what we've seen from him, going to Jackson State and that last-minute touchdown he had against FAMU was amazing. And then he goes to Colorado and has a great year last year, even though the team isn't very good. And then this year, the team goes into UCF as a 14.5-point underdog, and they blow UCF out of Nitro Stadium or whatever you want. I don't know what it's called. It doesn't matter. They don't really count. But yeah, so when I said that, I think Monroe is the favorite just because he's a quarterback at Alabama. I think they're going 12-0. I think they go 13-0. Well, actually, they might have to play Georgia again because they got rid of divisions as well. But at worst, I think he'll be 11-2, 12-1. So I think Monroe has the upper hand over Travis Hunter, who might be 7-5, 8-4, maybe 9-3. But yeah, if we're going by strictly who the best player in the country is, it's Travis Hunter, and there's no question. It's not debatable, TJ, in my opinion.
So all right. Sometimes when you're going through some stuff, right, it just feels good to like get all the way down in the mud and really like let your mind wonder about like how bad things could be. Is there a worse scenario than you could think of than Travis Hunter winning the Heisman? Colorado's at this moment, right? We'll see what their next couple of games look like. At this moment, Colorado is favored to win every game they play except for Kansas State. In 2, like they're on a bye this week, and then they play Kansas State. So they're favored to win every single game they play minus Kansas State, and they're a 4.5-point dog there. Say they lose to Kansas State and win out, or beat Kansas State and lose one more. 10-2, they're getting in. Like Colorado's getting in. Like there's no way they're
not leaving Prime out. The committee will not leave Deion Sanders out at 10-2.
In fact, this could be a hot take. They go 10-2 and lose the Big 12 championship because they'd be in because it'd just be one Big 12 loss. I think they could possibly get in at 10-3 because I do think the committee is going to try to not penalize teams for losing a championship game. Now, losing the SEC is very different than losing the Big 12. I understand that. But Colorado losing the Big 12 is different than Utah losing the Big 12 or Oklahoma State losing the Big 12. So talk about the kick in the nuts that it would be if Travis Hunter wins the Heisman. They go to the playoffs. Miami wins the ACC, and they're in the playoffs. And we win 2 games. And I'm certainly rooting against Miami. I'm not really rooting against Travis Hunter because he's just fun to watch, and I like seeing what he does. But it probably could not be a worse situation for Florida State fans this year to kind of, if that was to all culminate. Now, we're halfway through the year. I'm not saying all that happens, but there's a path to that happening, and I certainly. Yeah, I'll cry if all that happens. So I want to just throw that little scenario to you so that you can fret about it for the next several weeks too. So go Cal, right? Is all I have to say about that. All right,
all about that algorithm. Let's go.
Yeah, algorithm it up. Plus, if they beat Miami, I am transitive propertying the crap out of that. Like that will be my rallying cry. I'll put that in the bio.
If we had DJ, we would have beat y'all too. Just saying, Miami fans.
All right, score predictions for this game. Hey, if you're watching, if you're listening later, shoot me a message or an email or something on social media if you have any interest in coming by a tailgate. I'm working on something a little bit different this week. I don't know what attendance is going to be like there in Tallahassee, but if you're thinking about, and I hate them, but shout out the Gator fans for selling out that UCF game. They know their coach is gone, they know their team stinks, and they sold it out. So hopefully Florida State can get pretty close to a sellout too. I mean, you get a 20,000 seat advantage by not having the top of the one side open. So anyway, go to the game if you're going to be anywhere close. But thoughts on how this thing goes, Richie?
This might sound surprising. I do think the crowd comes out inspired. Even against Cal when we were 0-3, that the crowd was into the game based on what I saw on TV and everything I've heard. And I think they'll show up for this one. It's Clemson, right? If this was Duke or North Carolina or someone else, probably not. I do think it will be a full house with limited capacity due to construction. I do think the team comes out and they play inspired football. I think the defense, obviously, the entire game hinges on what they can do. I think they play inspired. I just don't think it's enough. I think they play a little bend, don't break. And I think Clemson ends up winning this game. Take the under 27-10 Clemson.
So Harlan's got 38-17. Honestly, I don't even know that I would hate that. Yeah, I'm somewhere in that range. I'll go like 34 to 10. It would, Florida State's averaging about 15 a game this year. It would surprise me if they got over that. So I think they're actually going to be a little bit under. 34-10. Noles lose by 24. I could certainly see this being a 14-3, 14-10 even. Ugh, that seems a little high. 14-7 game at halftime, where the defense is playing well. And then Florida State kind of gets punched in the mouth. And whether they quit or not, they don't have the dogs to keep up. Clemson makes some adjustments, which I think they'll be good at, and they'll run away with it. So 34-10 is my thought for this one this weekend. Richie, any parting thoughts, any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I'll be watching the game just like always. Actually, one last parting thought. Guys, if you're going to Tallahassee, please, please, please go to Garnet and Gold, go to Madison Social, go to Gordo's, go to all the local businesses. They suffer more than any of us do as normal fans from this rough season. Football season really drives them through the hotels. I don't care about them, but take care of your local businesses, please.
Yeah, it's rough on them when the team is not very good. And you think about the games that are left, UNC, Charleston Southern, Florida. I can't imagine. Florida maybe is okay attended, but if that's a 2-10, 2-11 or 2-9 team versus a 3-8 team, that ain't going to be very well attended either. 2 days after Thanksgiving, I think people will just watch it at home instead of going to the noon kick. So, yeah, if you're in town, make sure you hit up those local businesses and help them out a little bit. The ones that we support are the ones that support us and the ones that don't, right? Like all of them could certainly use your help. So, hey, come hang out this weekend. Appreciate, again, BetUS, Roback, Guthrie's for their support. We will talk to everybody soon. Make sure you're subscribed. If you tuned in and watched, you guys are the real MVPs for hanging out through this year. And we're going to be here one way or the other to talk about it. We might be mad as heck on Sunday, but we'll figure it out one way or the other. For Richie, Harlan, myself, TJ, we appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Go Noles.